Welcome to this version of the Voices for Voices TV show and podcast. I'm your host, founder and executive director of Voices for Voices, Justin Allen Hayes. Thank you for joining us today. As always, thank you for your love and support to keep us going. We're over 207 episodes at this point, hitting 300 at least by year end, and we are bringing voices from all walks of life to you, whether you're watching on a video, TV, or you're listening to this on the way to work or uh, just just hanging out for the day. So this episode we're going to be discussing the author and kind of what goes into being an author, not just from like a hobby, but for like a profession, because that is what there's a lot of people that do that, and we want to make sure we're sharing that because we think that can be very helpful for you, and then just as information that if you're interested, this is the type of work that goes into it, which I've been just amazed on uh, how much focus and work goes into being an author. But you almost have to be. And our guest today has been on the show prior, is David Solomon, and we're going to be talking about the kind of creative process, the works that he has done. So he has, as he's mentioned on prior episodes, he's written scripts, he's written long novels, he's ghost written, he's done a lot of things. So he can talk about that a little bit in depth. And then there are uh, some works that we want to plug first before we jump over to David. Is Destiny Halls is the name of the book by David Solomon. You can find that on Amazon, and hopefully you'll be able to see that here. And then after that, we have, let me see if I can get there we go. God's Heroes also. So these are works that are, then David can talk a little bit more about it, whether they're the most recent. But anyways, I'll be quiet for now. So David, thank you so much for joining us again on the show and being so transparent and open about your story. Uh, we've touched on the trafficking, so there's that aspect that you're working through every day, no matter what you do. But this being more of a uh, we talk about more uplifting as we go through this particular episode. So, David, thanks for coming on the show again, and feel free to take the conversation from here.
Well, I appreciate that. What a blessing it is to just have that ability to write and just uplift and touch people. And Destiny Halls, I really tried to do that with that project, and I kind of want to dive deep today into what it looks like being a full time author, but also for inspiring authors out there who say they can't do this, or people are breaking them down saying, you're never going to amount to anything, or you have to know someone in the industry in order to get in. And I kind of just want to dive deep into that and kind of look at, the myth versus, reality, and try to open some eyes and hopefully inspire some authors along the way. So those of you who do know me, my name is David Solomon. I'm the ghostwriter of Sound of Freedom. I've written over 400 different projects throughout the entertainment industry, including TV, novels, and comic books, movies, and a few video games along the way. Um, I've had the honor of working with some greats, and I want to share some advice and kind of a little bit of my journey as an author, and also more importantly, as an author of faith, because I know a lot of listeners um, are going to be coming from a Christian point of view. So this one is for you. Um, so when I knew that I first wanted to become an author, I fell in love with TV, and I watched a show called Smallville, and I watched the dynamic of the characters, and I saw that every episode made me or the watcher want to become a better person because Smallville was about morals. And so I said, well, I want to create something like that. I want to make my readers, and if I do a TV show, the watchers become a better person at the end of that journey. And so that is a very important question to ask yourself. Why does one become an author? Why are you doing this? So, number one is, why do you become an author? What is your motive? Are you doing it just for fun? Are you doing it because you have meaning behind it? What is your purpose of becoming an author? Um, a lot of authors start out as creative independents. And what that means is we see a lot of junior high and a lot of high school kids, and they just have these brilliant ideas. And I speak from experience in saying that a lot of parents don't support that. They're going, that's not going to go anywhere. You can't make a living. And I'm here to tell you that's a lie. You actually can. But you have to push, and you have to want to push and make your goal forward. Remember, if you want something, then you can have it, but you have to be able to put the weight and get to the finish line. That's something my mom taught me. Um, so at an early age, I knew I was going to become an author. I knew that's what I wanted more than ever. I wanted to make the world a better place. I wanted to make people think again, and I wanted my work at the end of the day to make people go, you know what, I want to become a better person. And so I wanted that impact. So that's why I became an author, first and foremost. I've always considered myself a Christian author because God has been just the rock and the light of my life, and that is the love that has carried in my heart, and the torch that I bear since I was a child writing. And I always pray before I pick up the pen and the paper, and I go, God, I want you to anoint these words, speak through me, and let your message come through clearly to those that will read this later on, or watch that later on, or play that video game later on. And I always watch that manifest, if you will, into people coming to God through different works and through different creations. And that really just not only warms my heart, but speaks volumes to reach the lost for the kingdom of God. And so God has really blessed me in that way. About 2012, I created a Facebook page called Mythical Creatures Around the World. And it was after I survived human trafficking. It was after a time in the period where I had given up on my faith. And one of my doctors was from another country. And I said, what country are you from? And so I never heard of the country. And that showed you where I was. I'm like, we live in the United States, we live in North America. We don't really think about little countries in South America, or you know, Asia or East Asia. We don't think about that. We just think that we're the only country, basically. Americans think that this is the only life. And that really opened my eyes to know that there are other people out there. And I guess I never thought that way before. So the doctor told me about his culture and that he loved God, but it was a little different. He still worshiped Jesus, but it was in a different language. And that really opened my eyes. And I went, wow, okay. So you go to church, you speak a different language. This is really cool. You have different culture. You know, I'm, they even go into detail that they wear different clothing at church. I'm speaking primarily for the Korean independent church, but also for the African American minuity of churches in America. There's these different cultures of different people that come together, and at the end of the day, they are worshiping Jesus. And we just cannot fathom that. A lot of us just go to our Baptist churches and we sit in the pew and we watch the pastor preach and we hear the sermon and we sing our hymns or we sing our modern day feel good songs, and we don't appreciate how many millions of believers are worshiping God in their own language, in their own way, in their own culture, and it's just a beautiful thing. So I created mythical creatures because I wanted to reach those audiences, and about a month into it, a Philippine newspaper contacted me and saw one of my posts and said, "We want you to be featured in this magazine." And my mom was ecstatic, and I was like, "Okay, I can do this." And so that was one of my first official moments where I saw that I could try to touch a little bit of this world in a huge way. So I published a story that is based on a myth in the Philippines, but it's also based in Egypt. And it's not preachy, but it does teach about the Bible. And that opened eyes. And not only that, but that opened conversation. And about maybe 8 years later, I watched that Facebook page grow to the point where it had 100,000 people a day, and even more so on some days. Just watch the post and message me and constantly go, I learned something from this myth. And a myth in itself is a beautiful thing. So Jesus taught parables, and it's kind of the same thing with myths and legends and lore. Uh, the indigenous tribes, or as you know, us Native Americans, we tell stories around the campfire, not because necessarily we believe them, but because we want to keep the children safe. I'll give you an example. You go to the beach in Oregon, where I grew up, and um, a mom says, "Don't go out there because this water woman, as we called her, is going to take you, and she's going to keep you for herself, and she's going to become your mother." And you tell a 6 year old or an 8 year old or a 9 or 10 year old that, and they're going to believe it, and they're not going to wander out to the beach. Of course, there are some curious ones that do, amen. But you know, that's kind of the same idea of don't go outside at night or someone's going to get you. Don't be online, and talk to strangers. Don't answer the door and talk to strangers. And we're doing the same thing. It's just a different cultural change. So, what is a myth really? What is a legend? Well, it's a parable. It's a parable to teach, sometimes teaching to children, but even sometimes adults. And so that's really interesting. And second, I discovered that every myth, every legend, every mythology ties to the Bible. What do I mean by that? Um, I'm sure a lot of listeners know what Aztec mythology is. I'm sure you know what Aztec mythology is. It comes from Mexico if you don't. And this is very interesting. The Aztecs believed that there was a pyramid, and the pyramid was built by the people to reach heaven. And God, the creator, they call him, well, he destroyed it. And he scattered the people to speak different languages and confuse them so they could never build it again. Now, this refers back to the biblical story in Genesis, the Tower of Babel. the same thing happened, just not in Aztec and not in Mexico. But isn't that interesting that that happened all the way near Israel? And this is on the other side of the world. These are cultures that didn't know each other. And so that's a beautiful thing to find. Um, Native American legend in Canada has another one that Coyote whispered to man to build a mountain. So they built the mountain to touch heaven and be one with God. And the creator in that folklore confused the tribes, and the tribes could not reach heaven anymore. And so they scattered, and they spoke different languages. And there's that story again, that beautiful story, the Tower of Babel. But also, every culture has a flood myth because Noah and the ark happened. And that is a very interesting and curious thing in itself. A lot of people don't talk about the fact that, well, China, you know, there was the dragon, and the dragon saved a human, and the human, there's different versions, but the human boarded a canoe, or a bamboo canoe down the ocean. But it's all the same. And especially in Native American culture, um, you always find first woman, first man, and they're actually called that. And they come from the tree of life. You can't dismiss that all these stem from one book, the Bible. And then it's very curious to me. I was actually speaking to someone in Hollywood the other day. The Hollywood people claim to not know the Bible and claim to have an agenda, and they do, given they do. But I call out the great Cassandra Clare, who I got to work with, and other people like that. They know the Bible, they twist the Bible, but they still got the Bible. They still got the characters. They may have altered the version, but they still got Adam and Eve. They still got Noah. They still got the fallen angels and the demons. Hollywood got that part right. What they didn't get right is that Jesus saves. So that is really interesting to note. And then you got people like doing their own thing that I've learned over the course of the years, like the Orisha with the African American community. They changed their God's name of worship because way back when the African Americans were brought from Africa, they were slaves, and they were forbidden to pray to God, and they were forbidden to pray to their own God. And so when the Americans brought them over, they worshiped the saints, the Catholics. And so they had this idea that they could pray to their gods, but they would change the name of their African Yoruba gods to be the saints of the Christians. And it's called Saint Orisha, and that is practiced today. And yes, it's wrong, but it also opened my eyes that we as Christians can persecute too. And we're not called to do that. And so, in talking to that community, they think that they are worshiping God, and they're not. And so, then my next question is, well, who ministers to them? Who talks to them? And then the church doesn't well, the church doesn't want to talk about reincarnation, and it doesn't want to talk about the new age, and it doesn't want to address these folklores and these superstitions. It just wants to say don't do them. But what happens to the people that do and don't know God? What happens to them? Are they welcomed in the church? So that's why I started Mythical Creatures, is to reach that audience, to tell parables. And to this day, that's why I write, to tell parables, to make someone a better person after they finish the story. Because if you're not, I haven't done my job. And so I really want the reader to think, and the watcher, the player of the game to think, about that choice. One of my favorite games is Star Wars games, especially RPGs that I got to help with, because every move, you have a choice, and every choice has a consequence. I love writing that way. And some of my characters, you know, are not Christian. In fact, for a while, I wrote in the secular world of DC and Marvel. I loved it, but something was missing, and so I'm eager to dive deep into what God has called me to do, and which brings me to my next point: um, writing with purpose, and asking yourself as an inspiring author, you know, why am I on this journey? What am I doing here? And you really gotta find the answer on your own. Sometimes you can pray about it, and God will reveal that to you in time. And sometimes it takes more than that. Um, Me personally, I knew I wanted to write for God because my faith was on fire, and I wanted to reach the world and let them know the joy that I felt and the security I felt in my faith and in my walk with God. But I wanted that for other people. Um, in Maryland about 4 years ago, um, I was working with a studio, and I was doing this secular project, and God spoke to me and said, I want you to drop that, literally in the middle of it, and I want you to write this real quick. So I took my notebook out in the studio and I wrote this story, and it saved somebody. It never got produced, but it saved somebody from committing suicide. And that was because I heard God say, write that story. And that's happened more than once. See, God uses his storytellers to touch the world. We aren't the pastors at the pulpit. We're the messengers that get the people to be in those pews, amen, to listen to the pastor at the pulpit. But furthermore, we as Christian believers are called to proclaim our faith in ways to reach people that won't even get into those pews, because you don't know if God is going to use you to preach a sermon and not have a pulpit. So when that person read that story, I'm gonna be honest with you, they were a witch. They believed in Satan and they openly worshiped Satan. And I was crucified for wanting to write this story for that community. And then I watched the impact it had on them. They became a devout Christian. They they threw away their demonic ways, and their black magic and their voodoo, and they turned all of that over and they surrendered to Jesus. And what a beautiful thing. What a blessing to see that happen in real time. And what a blessing to know that you were a seed that God used, that He planted in the ground to grow. And then you helped another plant grow. And in time, that's going to spread and you're going to have a garden. And what a beautiful thought that is, that you had a part to play in God's great, beautiful plan. So that story I'm going to produce, and that same story God told me to preach to a church in Texas. There was a lot of people, and I was scared, and it was testimony time. And God said, "You're going to tell this. You're going to share this." And I knew the pastor, and he said, "I want you to give your testimony, and if God has put a word on your heart as a writer, I want you to share it with us." And I shared it. And the quick version of it is this: you're walking to your car, and there's this man with a gun, and he cocks the weapon, and he says, "I'm going to shoot you." And you go, "My life is flashing before my very eyes. I'm going to die. It's over. This is it." And then this stranger, he comes in front of you and he pushes you away, and the gunshot fires and it hits that stranger. And the stranger dies in front of you. And the stranger is this man you don't even know, who took a bullet for you. And he says, "I die so you can live. Remember me and do good with your life. You have been given a second chance." So then I ask that person that's been given a second chance, wouldn't you want to know who gave you that second chance? Wouldn't you want to know why they took that bullet for you? Wouldn't you be on the phone, looking in the phone book or looking online, trying to find out who did that for you? Are you worthy of that? No, you're not worthy of that. Someone died for you. Someone took a bullet for you. Someone got shot for you. But but, but that did happen. That is the truth. That is what Jesus did, isn't it? But that's just a parable to make people from another community understand the grace of God and the second chance that Jesus gave us when He saved us and He paid that price on the cross.
I think this
And
is a
so,
good spot. We're running
yeah,
close to our time, and so we'll pick this up on the next episode.
absolutely.
So if you're watching, listening, stay tuned. We're gonna be coming back with David's just powerful testimony and given his experience of how he became interested in being an author and the impact that he has had on not only that individual uh, who didn't choose to take their life, but many, many more. So we'll pick up with that on our next episode with David. Thanks for joining us. If you can give us a thumbs up, if you can like, share, subscribe, we really appreciate that. And until next time, please be a voice for you or somebody in need.